Hi, I'm Dan Stair of Daniels Training Services, and I provide training and consulting services for the management of waste and also for the transportation of hazardous materials, domestic and international. So there's a link to my website in the descriptions to this video. You can check that out. The purpose of this video is to briefly explain the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations. So we're going to take a closer look at this book of regulations here. Now, a couple things. Before we can talk about IATA, we have to talk about ICAO. What is ICAO? ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization, and that is a specialized agency of the United Nations, okay? And what they do is the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, creates the technical instructions for the safe transportation of dangerous goods by air. And this then sets the minimum requirements, the minimum standards for the international transportation of dangerous goods by air. Now, these are merely recommendations, okay? And then countries throughout the world are free to choose to adopt those international standards as they see fit. These international standards are updated every 2 years. So every 2 years, the bigwigs of ICAO get together and they decide how they're going to change their regulations for the new edition. That's important. It's a 2-year cycle, okay? And like I said, this is a specialized agency of the United Nations, and nations are free to choose whether or not to adopt those standards. And we have in the US. So the ICAO technical instructions are fully authorized by the US DOT and PHMSA, all right, for the transportation of dangerous goods by air to, from, or through the US. That's important. So even though the US DOT has its own regulations for the transportation by air, they also authorize the use of the ICAO technical instructions, all right? So that's ICAO. Now, we're here to talk about IATA, not ICAO. What is IATA? IATA is the International Air Transport Association, and this is a trade association of the world's commercial airlines. So this is like an industry group, okay? The world's airlines got together and they made IATA. Now, IATA, as a trade association, makes their own dangerous goods regulations. That's what we're here to talk about today. Now, what are these? The dangerous goods regulations created by IATA are a field manual version of the ICAO technical instructions. So they didn't take the ICAO technical instructions and throw them out the window, anything like that. They made a field manual of the ICAO technical instructions. The IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations are written and edited by airline dangerous goods experts. Okay, so it's something the world's airlines made up for their own purposes. The point of it is it presents the requirements, okay, the requirements of the ICAO technical instructions in a user-friendly, easy-to-interpret manner. So again, let's be clear on this. IATA and the world's airlines didn't take those ICAO technical instructions and just say, nah, we're not going to do that, all right? Instead, what they did is took those requirements and made a field manual version that's easy to follow, easier to comply with. It also includes additional information to assist the shippers and packers of dangerous goods by air to make sure their consignments are in compliance with the regulations. So also the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations, more so than the ICAO technical instructions, more precisely describe how to prepare a shipment for transportation. So they go into more detail about do this, don't do that. They really help you navigate your way through the requirements of the ICAO technical instructions. And where they're different, wherever the IATA DGR differs from the ICAO technical instructions, it's because they're being more strict. So the airlines do add on some of their own requirements above and beyond what ICAO requires. So As the takeaway from all of this is, as long as you comply with the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations, you will be in compliance with the requirements of the ICAO technical instructions. All right. Now, one difference though is that, as I mentioned earlier, the ICAO technical instructions are updated every 2 years, but the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations are updated annually every year. And so I happen to be making this video on January 1st, 2021. All right. And as of that date, this is the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations for 2020. All right. And this was the 61st edition. This was only good through the end of December 31st, 2020. That's when these regulations were no longer in effect. As of January 1, 2021, you must use the 62nd edition of the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations, which are effective only from January 1 to December 31 of 2021. All right. So every year there's a new IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations coming out, and you must comply with them. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to go through the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations. I happen to have the 62nd edition here. All right. So we'll go through it in a little bit more detail and explain its different parts. Okay, so let's take a look at the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations. Again, note we are looking at the 62nd edition, which is effective just for calendar year 2021. However, the information that I'm going to be describing here is applicable to any year. So you really could use this as a guide for any edition of the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations. Now, a couple things. In its hard copy form, it comes either spiral bound or perfect bound, as they call it. I prefer the spiral. It helps it to lie flat. So when you're digging into the regs and going through it, it's easier for spiral. Costs a couple bucks more, but I think it's worth it for that. It is also available electronically. So if you're interested in that, there are advantages to having an electronic version of the regulations. It's available in many different languages. So this one is English, but there's many different languages in which the dangerous goods regulations are available. Now, in any language, there are some things about the regulations that I really like. First, you'll notice these big tabbed sections here. So the sections of the regulations really stand out. Not my little pink notes there, but these tabs here, all right? Also, you can't help but notice the color-coded pages, the blues, the yellows, and the pinks that are in there. That's very important as well. So there's a lot of things the regulations use to indicate, to help you use it as a field manual of the much more complex ICAO technical instructions. There are also, throughout the regulations, there are different reference marks and symbols that are used to help you understand when there's changes to the regulations and other things like that. I have a link to a video that explains those reference marks and symbols a little bit more. So let's take kind of a tour through the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations. So you've got your usual intro stuff, table of contents, things like that. And then we have an introduction, some basic level stuff there. This is important though. Significant changes and amendments to the 62nd edition. Now I wrote an article to this. I'll have a link to it in the description, but these are all the significant changes to this edition from the previous edition. That's very important. There's also some guidance on how to use the IATA DGR. And if you see here, there are some of those reference marks and symbols that explain where the changes are in the regulations. And again, I have a video that explains a lot more about that. So we get through some of those preliminaries, and then we have Section 1, applicability. What do we find there in Section 1? Well, a lot of the background stuff, the basis for the regulations, applicability, along with approvals, exemptions, and exceptions, things like that. But what's really important in Section 1 is the training requirements. Hugely important, especially because IATA is going to a competency-based training approach, which will make the IATA Dangerous Goods training much more complex than it is now. That does not become mandatory until the end of 2022. So we have some time, but you and others, and myself included, will need to come up to speed on the competency-based IATA training requirements and what that includes. So a lot of stuff there. Section 2, we've got a big tab there for 2. What do we find in Section 2? Well, Section 2 is the limitations. So here we find all sorts of stuff about forbidden dangerous goods. What's forbidden on an aircraft, and forbidden for the crew, forbidden for the passengers to take on board, things like that. And when sometimes they're okay. So if you ever wondered why you weren't able to bring your camping stove with you on the plane, well, here's the reason why. So these aren't really important, I don't think, for shippers and packers of dangerous goods. These are more important for the crew and passengers and things like that. We do have this, though. There are some exceptions. And one big exception that we find in Section 2 is the accepted quantity. This one here, if you've ever seen that red E symbol. So the explanation of how to ship a dangerous good as an accepted quantity is there. Also, shipping a dangerous good as a limited quantity. Okay, so all of that is in Section 2 as well. And then all the way down to the de minimis quantities. Then also very important in Section 2, we have the state and operator variations. That's hugely important. So here we have listed all of the states that have variations to these regulations, and then it goes through all of them. And by state, they mean country. Okay, when they say state, they mean Germany, Brazil, China, that sort of thing. So we've got our state variations, and then we have our operator variations also in Section 2. Very important. So you have to know your air carrier, your operator, and then you'll have to research and see if they have any variations to these regulations. So a lot of them, that brings us all the way to the end of Section 2. Big tab here, Section 3. What do we have here? Classification. So IATA puts these all on their own, in their own section. Section 3 is where you find all your defining criteria for the hazard classes and divisions and determination of packing group, and if you have multiple hazards, and all of that is in Section 3. So that's hugely important. Section 4, identification. So here's where we identify our dangerous good by name. And a big part, the most significant part of Section 4 is this, the 4.2 list of dangerous goods, the blue pages. All right, so they make them blue so they stand out. So this is the list of dangerous goods. If you're going to ship a dangerous good by air, you're going to have to find a name for it somewhere in column B in the list of dangerous goods. All right, that's one of your fundamental responsibilities. Also, in Section 4, we have the numerical cross-reference list, where if you know the UN ID number of a dangerous good, you can look it up here and find the proper shipping name. Also, hugely important in Section 4 are the special provisions found in column M of the list of dangerous goods. Your special provision codes are all explained here. And you have to know the special provision codes applicable to your dangerous goods, if any, and then comply with them. Section 5, what do we got here? We got the yellow pages. Packing, okay? Everything to do with packaging and packing them and packages and all of that, and your packing instructions. All of that is in Section 5, and they make all of Section 5 yellow, okay? The yellow pages. Section 6, what do we find in Section 6? That's our packaging specifications and performance tests. So that are all the requirements for your packagings. So the tests that they have to meet, the construction standards they have to be made to. So there are construction standards for a fiberboard box or a plastic drum or whatever. And then there are certain tests that they have to be able to pass. And so this usually falls on the packaging manufacturer. As a shipper or packer of dangerous goods, you don't normally dig into Section 6. However, there are the packaging requirements for shipping a limited quantity are found here. So if you're shipping a limited quantity by air, you're probably going to be going into Section 6 for that. Section 7, marking and labeling. So, and notice the pink pages, right? Most of these are pink. So Section 7 are all the marks and labels that go on your dangerous goods packages. All right, so they have them displayed in color, and so you can see the requirements for all of that. Section 8, documentation. This is, all in Section 8, is your shipper's declaration for dangerous goods. And here we have more pink pages, right? And then we have a bunch of examples of how your shipper's declaration should look for various consignments of dangerous goods. These examples are really handy. So if you ever have questions about completing a shipper's declaration, go to the back of Section 8, and they might very well have an example showing you exactly what yours needs to look like. Section 9 is handling requirements. So this is applicable to the operators. So if you are a shipper or packer of dangerous goods, you probably don't need Section 9. This is for the airport crew, the people loading the airplanes and dealing with it at the airport. Probably not you. Section 10, radioactive. All right, if you ship radioactive dangerous goods by air, then you'll have to research Section 10. If you don't, then Section 10 isn't for you at all. Notice there are a few more pink pages here for shipping radioactive, and they even have your shipper's declaration specifically for radioactive. So for many of you, I imagine, Section 10 will be a section you probably won't go to at all. After that, we have the appendices, and there's a lot of really good information in the appendices. These, for the most part, don't have tabs, but they are inked on the sides there, see? So you can still find them. So Appendix A is the glossary. Terms that IATA thinks you should know more about are explained more in depth in Appendix A, the glossary. Appendix B is your nomenclature. So different terms and units of measure and things like that are all explained in Appendix B. Appendix C is your currently assigned substances. So these are self-reactives and organic peroxides that have generic names here. You may or may not even refer to Section C unless you ship those dangerous goods. Appendix D identifies competent authorities around the world. So if you need to know, if you want to speak with the regulatory agency in Saudi Arabia or Senegal or China or whatever, well, they're identified here in Appendix D. Appendix E is tabbed, and that's all about packaging. So packaging testing facilities, manufacturers, and suppliers. So if you need a source of packaging anywhere around the world, you might be able to find it in Appendix E. Appendix F, related services. So this is training providers and other sources of information related to shipping dangerous goods by air. Appendix G, small one here. I can flip to that. Appendix G is your IATA safety standards. So again, this is probably more likely for the air carriers, the people who are working with the dangerous goods as they're being loaded, in the safety standards there. Appendix H So dangerous goods training requirements. So I mentioned those competency-based training requirements. Well, that is all explained, what they're going for, what they're looking for, the philosophy behind it, and all the requirements and all of that is explained in Appendix H. And this one doesn't have it, but sometimes there's an Appendix I showing the impending changes. So changes that are coming in the next few years, but there is not an Appendix I in the 62nd edition. In other editions, there may be. All right, so Appendix I shows you changes that are coming up in the regulations. And then finally, last tab, the index. So if there's a word or a term that you want to find in the regulations, you could look it up here, and then it'll show you the page number to go and find it. All right, so that's a brief tour through the IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations. If you need to buy a copy, or if you are going to comply with the regulations for transporting a dangerous good by air, this is what you must have. Okay, you can't go by hearsay or guidance documents or anything like that. You must have a copy of these regulations. Hi, I hope you liked that video. I hope it gave you information. I hope it helped you. So if you could help me out, that'd be great as well. You can subscribe to my channel. You can view the other videos that I've had, or you can connect with me on social media, check out my website, and always feel free to contact me if you have a question. Thank you.